Okay, thank you guys for coming. Everyone has your binders, so we will begin. So what we want to talk about today are assessments using summative, formative, and interim assessments to drive our instruction. Now, one thing that I want to share with you is a quote by an artist. She says, "Let me be as a feather, strong with purpose, yet light as heart, able to bend, and though I might become frayed, able to pull myself together again." And it may seem like a stretch, but go with me for just a moment. I want us to teach and assess our students like feathers. Because assessments, if you use them appropriately to drive your instruction, they should be empowering to them and not frightening or scary or hinder their growth. And if you use them incorrectly, that's exactly what they could become, is hindrance. So, we're going to go over the big three, because we always plan backwards from our assessments. It's always the proper way. Summative, formative, and interim, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about formative because in kindergarten, that's really where our lives revolve, is formative. All right, summative assessments. Summative assessments are a summary of skills learned, defined by standards, accountability, and informed policy. Actually, even speaking with Mrs. Strimmel, because we were talking about what our summative assessments are, because typically they involve FSA or EOC courses and exams. But in kindergarten, we don't have too many summative assessments that are nationally aligned. However, our MAP testing that we do is nationally ranked. And when the Twin Towers come in and do our professional development, all of our MAP data and Success Maker data and observation data is actually shared with Twin Towers. And their job is supposed to analyze that data and gear their professional development against the specific skills that our students are lacking. So that is our major summative assessment that we utilize in K2 land is our MAP testing. All right, so formative assessments, they adjust ongoing construction. They are explicit in purpose for diagnosing, embedded in the learning activity and small scale. They should only take seconds to minutes to complete. Obviously, our quick checks in math that we do after a lesson, exit tickets, those types of things. And in your binder, there's a lot of formative assessments that we'll go over that we can use. But our weekly tests would be considered formative. And then our small group assessments and our side word tests. Interim assessments fall between your formative and your summative. So they are likely determined by the school or district, and they predict the ability to succeed on summative. Benchmark, diagnostic, and predictive exams are typically called that. The exams that we give for our baseline exams at the beginning of the year, our Pearson exams that we give, our unit tests, those are all would be considered interim assessments. The problem is that we typically use them as a grade and then we kind of move on. And them being a true interim assessment, we really need to look at those to see what kind of value we're actually getting out of those. Because they should be aligned with the standards, and we'll go over that in a minute, and not just be a skim of a unit. They should be over the standards that we should have been covering over that. So we need to actually look at those more in depth to see if we're actually using them appropriately. So the tiers of assessment. So you have the formative. Now if you look at the triangle, so you have the frequency of administration. So obviously the longer the base is the more often you're supposed to give them. And then this is the scope of the duration of cycle. So when you start a unit, you would go formative, then interim, and then summative. So let's think about our interim assessment. So let's think particularly our unit tests. Okay, so you have to question how you're using them. So what knowledge do I want to gain from this assessment? You have to focus what you are actually planning to use this information for. Who's going to use this information that I gain? Are we going to meet as a grade level and talk about where our weaknesses are? Or, are we sharing them to do administration? I mean, those things may not typically happen, but when you're looking at a true interim assessment, that is actually how they are supposed to be utilized. What action will be taken and how will student learning improve from using that assessment? And there are 3 things I want to talk about with the theory of action. So you have instructional purposes. So they should be able to change instruction and curriculum based on results. Now, if we look at our interim assessments that we've been giving with our unit tests, I mean, do you think that they're actually changing instruction based on the results, or we're just moving on?
Moving on.
Moving on. And I think it's a curriculum concern, not a teacher concern. You see what I'm saying? So what we have to do is we need to make sure that if we're using these pieces, we're actually using them to help us, not, to follow the script, so to speak, and give it, but let's make it usable for us and for the students. So eliminate strengths and weaknesses. And I know that looks honky how it's written, eliminate strengths and weaknesses, but they should eliminate an imbalance of what they're strong in and what they're weak in. And the timing. The results should be shared outside of the classroom. We're an interim assessment. It shouldn't just be you and necessarily parents. It should be each one of us saying, hey, what did your kids miss or what did they not get? Evaluative purposes. So this is just a quote. Interim assessments are designed for evaluative purposes, program evaluation over the years. So the good thing about interim assessments is, say we give them and say my kids did really great on standard X and green, yours kids did way better on standard Y. Then you can talk about and not necessarily focus on, well, good Lord, my kids did horrible on Y. What am I doing wrong? Don't look at it that way, but instead share, okay, well, how did you teach that? Well, this is how I taught this. And then that's when you actually start collaborating, and then everyone's their betterment for it. Thank you. All right, predictive purposes, classroom, school, and district, and think transfer students. So obviously we have a lot of kids coming in and out right now. And so when you're looking at interim assessments and you're thinking about transferring, they may not be transferring to a school that's doing Pearson. But if they're transferring into the state of Florida, they should be transferring into a school that just went over those exact same standards. And that's where we really need to evaluate those assessments there. Okay. So, interim design, good, authentic and open-ended, immediate implications, which means you can actually use it immediately. Obviously, that's what that means, right? And directly linked to the standards, not so good, is all multiple choice, graded and filed, and linked to instruction, but not to standards. Okay. All right, so K-5 land, formative is our bread and butter, right? That's basically all we do is formative on a daily basis. So, what I want to talk about is emotional empowerment, and this is where I was speaking about the feathers. We want to make feathers of our students. So, and I think this is a really great quote, so I had to use it here by Richard J. Stiggins. So, the threat of pending summative assessment. The more on edge pupils were, these teachers believed, the harder we would study and learn, right? So, what happens is, and Fullen discusses the energy of a classroom and the energy of a school culture. So you can't just keep that up all the time. And if you've ever taught in a 3-5 classroom, right before the FSA or a standardized test, everyone is like on edge. The kids are on edge, the teacher's on edge. Everyone's about to go crazy and insane because the stakes are so high. The kids know the stakes are high. They're old enough to get it. The teachers are about to lose their mind. And then it's over, and then school is done for the end of the year because everyone has checked out. All right, and so And it's always been a mentality that if we hold the test over their head, okay, well, if you don't study your sight words, you're not going to do good on Friday. And we constantly hold that over their heads, and they're on edge all the time. So instead, if we use this as formative assessments to get them ready, where summatives aren't so stressful, interims aren't so stressful, weekly tests aren't so stressful, because it's an emotional cycle of failure. The learner's own interpretations of their assessment results influences their lack of confidence and their unwillingness to keep trying. So you know kids as young as 5 in our classrooms right now. Poor little Evan, he still has the exact same problem since he left me in first grade, is that when he realizes he can't do it, he's done. You know, some of them just shut down, and it's a confidence issue as little as we have in kindergarten. So we need to make sure that our formative assessments don't feel like formative assessments. They actually feel like they're talking to us and we're talking to them, and then there's multiple levels of feedback. So, assuring effective assessment. So, first it's effective. It has a clear purpose. We're going to go over each 4 of these. Clear purpose, plan it. Clear targets, the standards, accurate assessment, authentic, and effective communication feedback. So, plan it. This is in your binder. I made each of you 3. There's 3 pages. They're on cardstock, so you can hang them near your guided reading. Okay. One says Monday, Wednesday. The other one says Tuesday, Thursday, and the third one says Friday. And what it does is it breaks you down. Now, on the slide here, I just put the Monday and the Friday to show you. So you have to plan how you're going to assess them. So if you break down your guided reading group, your 25 minutes, okay, you have 10, 10, 5, 5, 5, 10, 5, and 10. And each day it progresses. So then on Friday, you have a game. Now, you might guess what a game is. A game is not a game. A game is an assessment. That's your little test. But they think it's a game. And it's a formative assessment. They know if they lose the game or not, right? They know if they win the game. You're able to coach them through it. It's not as stressful, and you still get very valuable feedback from it. So, the next stage, the standards. This is in your notebook. So what this is, all right, are you teaching and assessing the standards? So this would be like the first 10 days of school, and these are all the standards. And then you have units 1 through 10. How many units are in our Pearson curriculum? 6? 6. This is unit 1 through 10. Okay? And I say that to stress the fact that this is based on the actual Florida standards and the pacing guide for that. Okay? Now, the sounds, like if you turn below that, they also have a week 2 and a week 3 breakdown in there for you. Now that week 2 will take you through Christmas break, and the week through will take you after Christmas break till 15 school days after that, about 3 weeks after we return. So probably about the end of January. And I have all of the 10 files, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with all the units right now. But if you look at the sounds and at the standards and the word chunks and the phonetics and those breakdowns of those units, they are supported by our curriculum. So the availability of the material and the resource is still there when you need it, but you're now teaching Florida standards so that when your kid leaves you and goes to another classroom, they've had these same standards, right? And they are prepared. And your assessments match those standards. So it's a way of looking at the teaching and the assessments, not from the curriculum point of view, but the standard, and then using the curriculum to actually support the standards and not the other way around. The Unit 2 and Unit 3 breakdown that I gave you would be really good in your lesson plan because it has every detail in there as far as sounds, phonics, the statement of the standard, the objectives, and everything right there for 15 days at a time. Okay. All right, so accurate assessments, not just to get data or a grade. So these are also in your binders. All right, so this is what I mean by a game. This is a game. You take the thing and you spin it, and you have to answer which question. There's your standard that this directly aligns with. LAFSKRL 1.2. With prompting and support, retell familiar stories, including key details. That's exactly what this is. But what you've done is now you've played a game with them, and it's not out of 100 points because formative assessments don't come out of 100 points. Right? Only unit tests and interims come out of 100 points. Now you have 4. 1 out of 4. 2 out of 4. Just take notes. How many of those 4 did they get correct? And they just keep spinning until they answer all of them. Now you have a grade. They played a game. You know they understand the story. And it's during reading and after reading with the direct standard alignment. Over here, I think it's A through K is what I pulled for you. But it's all of the guided reading skills for each levelized reader, A through K. For example, there's pre-reader, which is going to be our AAs and our non-levels. And then you have A and B, where it tells you the actual skills and standards that you're supposed to have for that level. And then there's also a checklist for each level, I think A through M in your binder, that actually allows you to check off which standard that aligns to that level that they are able to meet when they get to that level. Okay, feedback, who knows? So formative assessments are not valuable without feedback both to the children and to the parents, right? And I didn't want to beat a dead horse, so to speak, about how you give feedback to the students, because if you're administering a formative assessment or a small group grade, you're already working with the child. You're already coaching them and talking them through the situation. But how do you talk to parents? So these are in there, I think, A through M as well. And what it does is it gives you a sample of a level A book. All right, I see a red apple. I see a green apple. And it gives you a sample for each level to send home to the parent. And then it also gives you things that they can do for that particular level. So like if they're in levels A to B, these are tips that they can do. Okay. So what's in your binder? So in your binder, you have a copy of this PowerPoint. You have a curriculum map. This is what the unit breakdowns look like. So you have a Unit 2 and Unit 3 breakdown. Like I said, I have them ready all the way through the end of the school year, but I just didn't want to send them all at one time. Guided reading plans and posters. So there's forms in there for guided reading plans, posters to hang in your at your area for reading techniques and strategies so that you can point and help them through the assessment. The retelling ones that I made there that can be a really great formative assessment and you can use in group. Reading achievement certificates. So in the back from A to Z there are reading certificates that you can give out to them as they meet a new level. And then guided reading resources and assessments, love, etc. There's lots of love in there, as you can tell from your covers. Okay. All right. So that's all I have for the assessments, but I do have a couple of pictures so that you don't have to like flip through everything all right away in your book. So I just took a picture of her. So in your notebook, this is what you'll see. So there's the wands, and then what that does is for a quick formative assessment. Your guided reading planning schedules to stress the importance of planning to assess. Then you have a copy of the PowerPoint, the curriculum map from beginning to end for kindergarten for Florida standards, the Unit 2 and 3 breakdown detailing standard implementation for the next 30 days. So your plans are almost done for 30 days.
Thanks.
And then you have these here, the guide for families, and that's the breakdown, A to J. For feedback and expectations so that you can let parents know how you're going to be grading on that level and what they need to be working on at home. And then the focus skills that are to be assessed for each level from A through M. There's also comprehension games and strategy cards in there so that you can either use them for a center or you can actually use them in small group, the different games, and just make copies for that. And then you also have the alphabet charts for RTI. There's different alphabet charts in there. And then there's alphabet games in there that you can use for that. There is an ABC book that focuses on sounds and not letters. So instead of having them say the letter when they read or make the book, you can do the class book and they actually have them have the sounds, and there's a little song that goes with it. Ah says ah, 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 and then you just go through all of it. And last but not least, then you have blank running records here. And it also gives you, just in case, not that you would ever forget this, ever, but it gives you the percentages there, below 90%, 90 to 94, 95 to 100. So, you know, in case you ever wanted to, like if a parent needed to see the running record because they wanted to know why their kid is on X, Y, or Z, then you could actually have this with them because it gives the directions of how it's tallied, but it's in friendly enough form that the parents know how you're grading it. And then the checklist for all levels A through Z, and it covers all the standards that are addressed at each level. Okay, and yeah, this is the last release. Sorry. And then you have a reading response journal. There's blank pages in there, so you can make master copies where they can either write or draw a picture, and they can respond to the writing. So you can use that as a journal or a small group or for a writing assessment. And then, yeah, in the very back are the reading certificates. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.